Sarah Vaughan, known as the Divine One, was one of the greatest voices in jazz history. Her sound was so unique and powerful that many said only Ella Fitzgerald could rival her. But behind the glamour, there was a shocking truth. Many of her peers claimed that part of her success came from her zero KE habit, something that most artists would see destroy their careers. For Sarah, it became part of her story. In this video, we'll take you inside Sarah Vaughan's abandoned house, explore her incredible career, her fortune, and the sad details of her final years. Stay tuned to find out. Sarah Vaughan's story began on March 27, 1924, in Newark, New Jersey. She was the only child of Asbury Jake Vaughan, a carpenter who also dabbled in guitar and piano, and Ada Vaughan, a hard-working laundrywoman whose voice filled the local church choir. Music ran through the household on Brunswick Street, where Sarah grew up listening to hymns, melodies, and the sounds of her parents' devotion to both faith and song. The Vaughan family was deeply rooted in the new Mount Zion Baptist Church. It was there, at just 7 years old, that Sarah's own journey began. First came piano lessons, then singing with the choir, and soon enough she was playing piano at church events. But while gospel shaped her foundation, her heart quietly wandered elsewhere. Sarah fell head over heels for jazz. She slipped into bars she was far too young to enter, mesmerized by live performances, and she found her place in her high school jazz band, her fingers flying across the keys with confidence well beyond her years. In 1939, everything changed with a knock on the Vaughan's door. A nightclub owner from one of Newark's rougher neighborhoods had seen Sarah perform and wanted her to play in his club every night. The revelation shocked Jake and Ada. Suddenly, they understood why their 15-year-old daughter was always tired, and why her bedroom window mysteriously opened at night, even in winter. Sarah had been sneaking out to live a double life, dutiful daughter by day, rising jazz performer by night. The tug-of-war at home only grew stronger when she decided to leave school altogether. "I want it, I like it, and I'm going to hit it," she declared, announcing her pursuit of stardom. Her father was furious, but Sarah's determination was immovable. By her late teens, she was already a fixture on the local club circuit, cigarette in one hand, a glass of gin in the other, captivating audiences with her smoky voice and sharp wit. Musicians began calling her No Count Sarah, a nickname that reflected both her independence and her refusal to play by anyone's rules. At 18, a dare from a friend led her to the stage of Harlem's Apollo Theater. She stepped up to the microphone and delivered body and soul with such richness and flair that the audience was stunned. She won the amateur contest that night and landed a week-long booking at the Apollo. It was the break she had been chasing. "I was going to be a hairdresser before I got into show business," she later recalled to Downbeat. "I always wanted to be in show business. And when I got in, I didn't try. I just went to the amateur hour, and in 2 weeks I was in show business. It shocked me to death. That week changed everything. Billy Eckstein of the Earl Hines Orchestra heard her sing and knew instantly she was something special." By April 23, 1943, Sarah Vaughan was making her professional debut with Hines's band. Just 2 years later, in 1945, she was ready to step out on her own, already proving that her talent could carry her far beyond Newark, beyond Harlem, and straight into history. In 1947, Sarah Vaughan's life took another dramatic turn when she married trumpeter George Treadwell. Their story began at Cafe Society in Greenwich Village, where George first heard her sing. The way he described it later, it wasn't just attraction, it was love at first note. Before he even fell for Sarah the woman, he had already fallen for Sarah the voice. But as with so many tragic tales in show business, that love story came with a catch. George soon became not just her husband, but also her manager. He took complete control of her career, deciding everything from what songs she sang to what gowns she wore. It was a gamble, and for a while it worked. Under George's sharp business sense, Sarah's career skyrocketed. She recorded unforgettable hits like Tenderly and Its Magic, songs that carried her to the top of both jazz and pop charts. Her salary leapt from a modest $250 a week to an astonishing $2,000, plus a percentage of ticket sales. George hustled hard on her behalf, lining up interviews, radio airplay, and stacking up awards that confirmed Sarah's rising status. He even masterminded her first national tour, transforming her into a household name. Soon, the world began calling her what she would forever be remembered as, the Divine One. And yet, Sarah herself admitted she wasn't good with money. She once quipped, "He can count good," pointing to George's knack for finances. That meant she left it all in his hands. They bonded over simple things. Both were chili lovers. But behind the curtain, their relationship was already showing cracks. By the early 1950s, even with earnings close to $200,000 a year, roughly $2 million in today's money, Sarah felt suffocated by the pop mold Columbia Records was pushing her into. Craving more artistic freedom, she split from Columbia and signed with Mercury Records, which allowed her to balance both jazz and pop on her own terms. Her international reputation soared when she embarked on her first European tour in 1951. In London, Paris, and Munich, crowds flocked to hear her velvet tones. Friends later recalled that trip as one endless party, marveling at how her habits, alcohol, cigarettes, and even cocaine, seemed only to enhance her voice. She sang with a husky warmth that audiences adored, no matter what vices fueled it. But the marriage with George Treadwell was deteriorating. By the time Sarah recorded Broken-Hearted Melody, a song she privately dismissed as cheesy, their relationship was on the rocks. Though the track became a massive hit and even earned a Grammy nomination, the couple divorced soon after. Then came the shocker. George revealed that, of the $150 million Sarah had supposedly earned during their time together, only $16,000 remained. Sarah had no bank account, no financial control, and no idea where the money had gone. Yet, remarkably, she refused bitterness. "Well, you know what?" "Whatever," she shrugged. "He did make me super famous. So whatever happened to it, happened to it." But money troubles weren't her only battle. Sarah also faced the raw, ugly side of fame. As a black woman in mid-century America, she endured everything from shabby, segregated dressing rooms to racist abuse from audiences. In one Chicago gig, hecklers even pelted her with tomatoes. And still, she never let it break her. Instead, she pushed her voice harder, exploring new ranges and captivating audiences until every performance turned skeptics into fans. Unlike many singers, Sarah didn't retreat to quiet hotel rooms after shows. She was right there with the band, drinking, smoking, swearing like a sailor, and living every note of the life she sang about. It was in the smoky after-hours jam sessions, surrounded by musicians, drinks, and laughter, that Sarah Vaughan slipped into a habit that would follow her for decades. Cocaine became her companion, a dangerous indulgence that, strangely enough, never seemed to dull her talent. If anything, friends swore it sharpened her edge. No matter how wild the party, how little she slept, or how much she drank, Sarah's voice only grew more powerful. Her husky, velvety renditions of classics like He's Funny That Way, Once in a While, and Sweet and Lovely set a new gold standard in jazz performance. But as her personal life unraveled, Sarah once again sought stability in romance. Not long after parting ways with George Treadwell, she fell into the arms of another man, Clyde C.B. Atkins. Atkins was a colorful figure, full of swagger and grand claims. He boasted of owning a fleet of taxicabs, hinted at connections in professional football, and painted himself as a man of success. In reality, most of it was smoke and mirrors. He knew little about business, even less about music, and lied as easily as he breathed. Yet Sarah was smitten. Blinded by affection, She repeated the same mistake she had made before. She handed him the reins of her career. Together, they launched a new management company, the Divine One, with CB at the helm. At first, it seemed like things might work. Sarah left Mercury Records and signed with Roulette, expanding her horizons and even representing the United States abroad. In 1958, she traveled to Europe under the sponsorship of the State Department, dazzling audiences at the Brussels World Fair with her voice. On the surface, her personal life looked just as successful. In 1961, she and CB adopted a baby girl named Deborah, later known as Paris Vaughan, who would go on to become a successful actress. To the public eye, Sarah had it all: a thriving career, a beautiful family, and a glamorous lifestyle. But behind closed doors, the reality was far darker. Friends whispered that CB was controlling and abusive, keeping Sarah under lock and key whenever she wasn't on stage. He gambled away her hard-earned money and subjected her to violent outbursts, some so severe they left marks no amount of makeup could hide. Sarah herself admitted that he threatened her life whenever she tried to break free. By 1962, she had finally had enough and filed for divorce. But the split came with a devastating price. Unlike her first marriage, which had at least left her with a small nest egg, this time, Sarah walked away in ruins. CB's reckless spending and shady dealings left her drowning in $150,000 of debt, a crushing sum for the time. Worse still, she was in trouble with the IRS, which seized her New York home over unpaid taxes. With nowhere else to go, Sarah and little Deborah sought refuge with John Preacher Wells, an old friend from her early days. Wells wasn't just a shoulder to lean on. He became her manager and lover, guiding her through yet another turbulent chapter. For the first time in her adult life, Sarah finally opened an official checking account, gaining at least some control over her finances. Preacher gave her a measure of stability, though the shadows of her past choices never fully left her. Old habits, however, refused to let Sarah Vaughan go. According to bassist Roy McClure, who spent countless nights performing by her side, Sarah had a ritual before nearly every show. She would indulge in a chaotic cocktail of substances, cocaine, alcohol, and cigarettes, fueling her body with the very things that would one day destroy it. Yet when the lights dimmed and the spotlight hit her face, it was as if all the vices vanished. In their place came that voice, rich, husky, velvety. She'd sing like an angel, McClure marveled, shaking his head at the paradox of it all. But the cost of such habits was heavy. Offstage, those substances blurred Sarah's judgment and dulled her control over her own life. She became, as McClure described, like a little girl in her private life. The men around her handled everything, her career, her money, her decisions, while she floated through it all in a haze. It left her vulnerable, easy to manipulate, and often taken advantage of. By the mid-1960s, jazz itself was losing ground. Rock and roll was storming the airwaves, and Sarah's golden hits were suddenly being labeled oldies. But Sarah refused to fade quietly. Always restless, always hungry to stretch her talent, she recorded The Messiah with Quincy Jones and even flirted with the world of opera. Still, between 1967 and 1970, her career stalled. Without a record label, she made no new recordings, a silence that weighed heavily on her momentum. Her relationship with John Preacher Wells eventually collapsed as well, and Sarah packed up her life with her daughter Deborah and headed west to Los Angeles. Determined to keep her name alive, she appeared at jazz festivals and concerts, often sharing the stage with giants like Billy Eckstine, Ella Fitzgerald, and Carmen McRae. She was still the Divine One, but the years of chaos and uncertainty left her fragile. Then came Marshall Fisher. Unlike the men before him, Marshall was different. A successful restaurateur from Chicago, he had both a deep love for jazz and an even deeper admiration for Sarah herself. He first saw her perform in California and was captivated, not just by her music, but by the woman behind the microphone. Against the backdrop of a racially divided America, their romance blossomed. Fisher was white. Sarah was a celebrated African-American diva. The relationship drew whispers, criticism, and backlash, but Sarah ignored it. One friend described their love in simple terms. He hustled her music, not her money. Unlike George Treadwell or C.B. Atkins, Fisher wasn't trying to exploit Sarah. He was protecting her. He ensured she looked elegant, sang the right material, and mingled with the industry's most powerful players. He guided her without suffocating her, offering support instead of control. Under Marshall's influence, Sarah found a rare kind of stability. She moved with him into a beautiful home in Hidden Hills, Los Angeles. The press adored the pairing, splashing photos of them across magazines and gossip columns. Reporters casually called him her husband, though the two never married. To Sarah, it didn't matter. For once in her tumultuous life, she felt anchored. But as with so many chapters in Sarah Vaughan's life, even the good moments eventually unraveled. After her time with Marshall Fisher, Sarah's heart was drawn to yet another musician, Wayman Reed, a younger trumpeter known for his raw talent, his heavy drinking, and his deeply troubled mind. Some whispered that he was demon-possessed, a man haunted by forces no one around him could fully understand. Sarah was 54 when she walked down the aisle with Reed, still believing in love despite everything she had endured. Yet the marriage was rocky from the start. Reed's dependence on alcohol and his mental instability created an environment that was as turbulent as it was unsustainable. By 1981, the relationship collapsed under the weight of his illness. Another marriage ended, another scar left behind. And yet, while her personal life was in shambles, Sarah's career was nothing short of triumphant. She was making a fortune from her recordings and live appearances, traveling the world and standing on some of the grandest stages. Presidents invited her to perform at the White House. Congress honored her contributions to American culture. Her televised Gershwin Live concert on PBS earned her an Emmy, and she was inducted into the Jazz Hall of Fame. Accolades piled up. She was nominated for 9 Grammys, winning twice, and in 1989 the Recording Academy gave her the Grammy for Lifetime Achievement, a recognition that cemented her as one of the greatest voices in music history. Jazz critic Scott Yano summed it up perfectly. Sarah Vaughan's voice was one of the most wondrous of the 20th century. Despite the endless applause, Sarah never let stardom get to her head. In an interview with Downbeat, she said simply, "It's unbelievable, that's what it is, that everybody likes me as well as they do. But I'm the same way now that I was when I was 18. I don't go for that star stuff. All the stars are in heaven, but time was catching up with her." By the late 1980s, the once invincible Divine One began to feel the toll of her lifestyle. Arthritis stiffened her fingers, her breath grew shorter, her body more fragile. Still, Sarah pushed forward, determined to keep singing as long as she could. That was who she was, a fighter, a survivor. Then came the performance at New York's Blue Note. For the first time in her career, Sarah had to bow out. The reason was devastating. She was battling lung cancer. After decades of cigarettes and late-night habits, the disease she had outrun for so long had finally caught up with her. By 1989, the cracks in Sarah Vaughan's health were beginning to show. Decades of performing, constant travel, and her long-time habits had finally started to take their toll. Still, the Divine One was not ready to surrender her stage. In February of that year, she dazzled audiences once more, her voice as radiant as ever. Yet behind the curtain, she was already fighting a private battle. She soon canceled a string of European engagements, officially citing severe arthritis in her hands. The pain made playing piano more difficult, and it was clear her body was no longer keeping up with her relentless pace. Even so, her determination pushed her forward. She flew to Japan and completed a series of concerts, proving once again that her artistry could outshine even the growing shadow of illness. But the turning point came later that year during a run at New York's famed Blue Note Jazz Club. It was supposed to be another triumph, a reminder of her place among jazz royalty. Instead, it became the moment her world shifted forever. Midway through the engagement, doctors diagnosed her with lung cancer. Too weak to finish her final set, she stepped off stage without knowing she had just performed for the last time. From then on, her life slowed to a rhythm she had never known. Sarah returned to her home in California and began chemotherapy, shuttling between hospital rooms and the quiet of her house. The treatments drained her, and the woman once celebrated for her boundless energy grew weary of the struggle. Eventually, she told her loved ones she wanted no more hospitals. She wanted to go home. On April 3, 1990, at the age of 66, Sarah Vaughan passed away in the evening hours, sitting in her own living room, the television flickering with Laker Girls, a made-for-TV film featuring her daughter, Deborah. It was a strangely gentle end for a woman whose life had been filled with thunderous applause. Her funeral took place at Mount Zion Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, the very church where her journey had begun as a little girl in the choir. The ceremony drew friends, fans, and fellow musicians, all united in mourning the loss of a legend. Afterward, her casket was carried through the streets in a horse-drawn carriage, a final regal procession for the Divine One, before being laid to rest at Glendale Cemetery in Bloomfield. Sarah Vaughan's voice may have been silenced, but her legacy, as one of the most wondrous voices of the 20th century, remains eternal. When Sarah Vaughan, the Divine One of jazz, passed away in 1990, she left behind more than just an unforgettable voice. She also left behind a fortune that reflected her decades at the very top of the music world. At the time of her death on April 3, 1990, her net worth was estimated at around $4 million, a sizable figure for a jazz singer, especially given how often poor management and industry exploitation had drained her earlier earnings. Back in the 1940s and 1950s, Vaughan's salary soared to unheard-of levels for a black female artist. Under the guidance of her first husband and manager, George Treadwell, she went from $250 a week to nearly $2,000 a week, plus cuts of ticket sales, equivalent to nearly $20,000 a week in today's money. By the late 50s, she was grossing close to $200,000 a year, nearly $2 million in current value. Later, with Roulette Records and Mercury, her hits like Tenderly and Its Magic cemented her reputation, while her relentless touring schedule filled Carnegie Hall and European concert halls alike. Even into the 80s, she was commanding fees at festivals and presidential events, her voice still capable of silencing rooms. Despite financial disasters caused by her marriages, George Treadwell left her with only $16,000 after millions had passed through her hands, and Clyde C.B. Atkins left her with IRS debts. Vaughan eventually regained control over her money. By the end of her life, she was financially stable, owning property and valuable rights to her catalog. Her primary heir was her daughter, Deborah Lois Atkins, better known today as actress Paris Vaughan, who inherited her mother's estate. Deborah was Sarah's only child, adopted during her marriage to Atkins in 1961, and she became the beneficiary of her royalties, properties, and the legacy that continues to generate income through reissues, licensing, and tributes. What captured the public imagination most, though, was Vaughan's home, a serene retreat in Hidden Hills, Los Angeles, California, where she spent her final years. The address, 26125 Farmfield Road, Hidden Hills, California, became her sanctuary. The house was a spacious ranch-style property, tucked behind gated streets lined with oak trees. It was the opposite of the smoky jazz clubs and crowded stages she had lived in for decades, peaceful, sunlit, and quiet. The home featured 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, with wide-open living spaces that looked out on rolling lawns and horse trails, a hallmark of the Hidden Hills neighborhood. Vaughan was known to spend afternoons on her back patio overlooking the gardens, sometimes rehearsing softly at the piano by the window. The house wasn't ostentatious like the Hollywood mansions of pop stars. Instead, it reflected her personal taste for comfort and understated elegance. Today, the home still stands, valued at around $3.5 million on the current real estate market. Hidden Hills has since become a celebrity enclave, home to stars like the Kardashians and Drake. But in Vaughan's time, it was a quieter, more secluded community, ideal for an artist who wanted both privacy and space to breathe. Sarah Vaughan's house remains a reminder of her final chapter. A woman who had sung for presidents, filled Carnegie Hall, and toured the world, finally resting in a home that gave her peace. While her daughter Deborah continues to preserve her legacy, the house at Farmfield Road holds the echoes of jazz's most divine voice, a place where the music, even in silence, never truly fades. Even in death, Sarah Vaughan's influence continues to grow, her recordings cherished by jazz lovers across generations, and her name etched into the very history of American music. Her home in Hidden Hills may now belong to someone else, but it still carries the aura of the Divine One, a woman whose voice reshaped jazz forever. What do you think was Sarah Vaughan's greatest legacy? Her timeless music, her resilience through hardship, or the glamorous yet complicated life she led behind the stage? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss more stories about the fascinating lives of the world's greatest stars.